The winter wind howled outside the grand mansion, rattling the old windows as snow covered every path leading to the estate. Inside, the mansion was warm, filled with the glow of a roaring fireplace, expensive paintings, polished wooden walls, and shelves packed with rare books. Everything reflected unimaginable wealth, yet the silence inside the house felt strangely lonely. 80-year-old billionaire Edward Harrington sat quietly in his favorite chair beside the fire. For years, he had built one of the country's largest business empires, but success had come with a painful price. His family barely visited, relatives only called when they wanted money, and most employees treated him with respect only because of his fortune. Deep inside, Edward had begun to wonder whether genuine kindness still existed. Earlier that day, while driving through the city, he noticed a thin young boy helping an elderly street vendor whose cart had tipped over. The boy never asked for a reward. Instead, he smiled, picked up the scattered fruit, and quietly walked away. That single act stayed in Edward's mind. Curious, Edward asked his driver to learn more about the child. The boy's name was Noah, only 11 years old. He lived with his sick grandmother in a tiny apartment and earned a few dollars after school by collecting recyclable bottles and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Despite having almost nothing, people described Noah as honest, respectful, and hardworking. Edward decided to test the boy, not to embarrass him, but to discover whether kindness could survive real temptation. The next afternoon, Edward invited Noah to the mansion under the excuse that he needed help carrying firewood and organizing old books. Noah accepted gratefully, hoping to earn enough money to buy medicine for his grandmother. After finishing several chores, Noah noticed Edward sitting motionless in the large chair with his eyes closed. His breathing was slow, and he appeared to have fallen asleep. On the nearby table rested a white envelope. It was slightly open, revealing several crisp $100 bills. For a boy who sometimes skipped meals, the money could solve many problems. Edward kept his eyes shut, silently waiting. What happened during the next few minutes would change both of their lives forever. Noah stood quietly beside the armchair, unable to take his eyes off the white envelope. The corner had folded back just enough to reveal neat stacks of $100 bills. He had never seen so much money in one place before. His heart began to race. He thought about his grandmother lying in bed with a persistent cough. The doctor had prescribed medicine they still couldn't afford. Their kitchen cupboards were nearly empty, and the electricity bill had gone unpaid for 2 weeks. Just one bundle from that envelope could buy food, medicine, and warm clothes for months. His hand slowly lifted toward the table. Then he stopped. Noah lowered his eyes and took a slow breath. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Being poor is never something to be ashamed of. Losing your honesty is. He gently pulled his hand back. Looking at Edward, who still appeared to be asleep, Noah noticed that the blanket covering the old man's legs had slipped onto the floor. The fire had also burned lower, and the room was beginning to cool. Without making a sound, Noah picked up the blanket, shook off the dust, and carefully covered Edward's legs again. He walked to the fireplace, added another log, and waited until the flames burned brightly. The warmth quickly filled the room once more. As Noah turned to leave, he noticed Edward's wallet lying near the chair where it had slipped unnoticed. He picked it up, placed it beside the envelope, and made sure both were easy to find when the old man woke up. Not wanting to leave without saying anything, Noah searched the room until he found a small notepad and pencil. On a single sheet, he wrote, "Thank you for letting me help today. I hope you have a nice evening. Your wallet is on the table. Please take care of yourself." He folded the note neatly and placed it under the wallet so it wouldn't blow away. With one last glance at the sleeping man, Noah quietly walked out of the mansion, carrying only the small payment he had honestly earned for his work. The front door clicked shut. A few seconds later, Edward slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the untouched envelope, the blanket carefully covering his legs, and the handwritten note. For the first time in many years, tears quietly filled his eyes. Edward remained seated long after Noah had left. The envelope of cash was exactly where he had placed it. every bill untouched. Beside it rested his wallet and the small handwritten note. He read the message again, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He pressed the intercom and asked his longtime driver, Michael, to come into the study. "I need you to do something for me," Edward said quietly. "Find out where that boy lives. Don't speak to him. Don't let him know you're there. I only want to understand who he really is." Michael nodded and left. From a distance, he watched Noah walk through the snow instead of taking a bus. The boy stopped at a neighborhood grocery store, counted the few dollars he had earned from helping at the mansion, and bought a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a small bag of vegetables. He looked at the medicine shelf for a moment, checked the price, and silently put the bottle back before leaving. When Michael returned, he described everything he had seen. Edward frowned. He had the chance to take thousands of dollars, yet he walked away with only bread. The next evening, Edward insisted on seeing the place himself. His car stopped on a quiet street, lined with aging apartment buildings. From inside the vehicle, Edward watched Noah climb a narrow staircase carrying the grocery bag. A few minutes later, the curtains shifted, and through the window he could see the small apartment. Noah placed the food on the table and smiled at his grandmother. "I'm sorry I couldn't buy your medicine today," he said gently, "but I earned this honestly. I'll work again tomorrow." His grandmother reached for his hand. "You came home with your honesty," she replied. "That's worth more than anything money could buy." They shared a simple meal together, laughing over stories from Noah's school as though they had a feast before them. Edward felt a lump rise in his throat. He thought about the people who had lied to him for millions, while this child refused to steal even when his own family was struggling. As the car pulled away, Edward stared silently out the window. He realized that all his wealth had never given him the peace he had just witnessed inside that tiny apartment. That night he barely slept. Before the sun rose, he had already made a decision that would change Noah's future forever. The following morning, Noah was surprised to hear a knock on the apartment door before he left for school. When he opened it, he froze. Standing in the hallway was Edward Harrington, dressed in a simple overcoat, with his driver a few steps behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Edward smiled gently. "May I come in?" Noah looked toward his grandmother, who nodded warmly. Their apartment was small, with worn furniture and faded wallpaper, but it was clean and welcoming. Edward quietly looked around, taking in the modest home without saying a word. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. Noah looked confused. "I wasn't really asleep yesterday. I wanted to see what you would do when no one was watching." The boy's face turned red with embarrassment. "I hope I didn't do anything wrong." Edward shook his head. "You reminded me that honesty still exists. You had every reason to take that money, yet you chose to protect a stranger instead." Noah lowered his eyes. "My grandmother always says that if I lose my honesty, I'll lose the most valuable thing I have." Edward turned toward the elderly woman. "You've raised an extraordinary young man." She smiled. "I only taught him that character lasts longer than money." Edward reached into his briefcase, but instead of placing cash on the table, he laid down several documents. "I don't want to give Noah a handout," he explained. "I want to give him opportunities." The papers included a full scholarship covering Noah's education through university, complete medical treatment for his grandmother, and an offer for the family to move into a safe apartment owned by Edward's charitable foundation until they could stand on their own. Noah stared at the documents in disbelief. "Why would you do all this for us?" he asked quietly. Edward's eyes became watery. "Because yesterday you gave me something I couldn't buy with all my wealth. You restored my faith in people." Years passed, and Noah worked hard in school, earning excellent grades while never forgetting where he came from. After graduating, he joined Edward's foundation, helping children from struggling families receive education, food, and medical care. Whenever someone praised Edward for his generosity, he would simply smile and say, "A poor boy once reminded me that real wealth isn't measured by the money you keep, but by the kindness and integrity you choose to live by." Moral: true character is revealed when no one is watching, and honesty can open doors that money never can.